Tēnā katoa koutou, tēnā tātou e te iwi. Kia ora everybody, Te Pai Pai Waho, Che Wilson here, part of Te Pai Pai Waho, and it's a new season. Season 4, I've been absent for a little while on holiday and having a bit of fun. So I thought I'd just crack into it, get back into reality now that school's started. And so, new season, season 4, and episode 1. And the theme for the next little while, possibly for the whole season, is Tangihanga. And what I'm going to do is cover a few set kaupapa and then wait for your questions to see what else I could be doing and covering in the hope that it helps people. So that's us for tonight. It's Tangihanga, season 4, episode 1, and I'll just open us up and then we'll get into things. Tēnei te ara ka irunga te aro, tēnei tupua te aro, tēnei ara ki te aro rangi rau, ko papa e takoto nei, ka puta ki wao ki te whai au ki te ao mārama. Hui e, tāi ki e. Tai ki e kia tātou. Nā e mi ana kia tātou, i roto i ngā tini āuatanga o te wā, e ki te atu ana i te rā e tō ana ki te au āuru, ko tērā kaumātua ki poe ākena, Uncle Bob, e moe, tatu atu kia koe te tuakana tīpene, o rere te rongo, tangi kauana te ngākau, i tōrirotanga atu ki te iwi nui. Nā reire oa, nei a kume i kia koe, taku poroporo aki kia koe, kōrua ko te kaumātua ki Waingaroa, kōrua koutou ki te pō e moe e oki. Kia ora everybody. It's been a couple of weeks and mindful that I've just been enjoying summer. But hope you're all well and just want to acknowledge Stephen Nihaka, who's passed away yesterday. Massive shock. Nā reira bro, aere atura. Also want to acknowledge that we're gearing up for Waitangi Day on the 6th, and just want to acknowledge that it's a special time for us as we continue to not only remember, but continually debate and question. And it's a good thing to debate. It's a good thing to question. It's a good thing to check to make sure that any biases we may have aren't clouding the discussions we need to have around nationhood. So, mihi ana ki te tiriti o Waitangi, me te wairua te tiriti o Waitangi, nāna tātou i wakararau a ako ngā piki me ngā eke i roto i ngā tauma ama ane. And want to do a shout out to Lana Brown in Australia. Tēnā koe Lana, thanks for your support. And other than that, let's get into it. So, Tangihanga. What I'm going to cover is a number of subjects, but the first thing I want to do is just to do a quick introduction into Tangihanga, and then once we're doing that, I'll cover some of the topics I'll be going over, and then based on your feedback, we can go from there and see what else we can talk about. So, what do you do when a loved one passes away? Not only is it an emotional time, but it is a time when you should cry, which is why it's called a tangihanga, tangi meaning to cry. And over the generations, many people have stopped crying, but it's a really important part of grieving is to let that out. And though the tikanga from England has prevailed for a long time, everyone should be tanging, not just men, not just women, but men as well. All of us should have a tangi, because that's how we let that pain out, and it's also how we let that person travel on to their next life. I te awairua ki tua o te arai. And so what do you do? A lot of people are quite open about tangi these days, and I remember in the 80s when we first did our first Tangihanga insurance. And so one of my uncles would always actively ask people about their funerals, about where they wanted to get buried, and occasionally he would say, "Oh, well, just so you know, we're going to fight that wish of yours because we want you to come home." And so all of those types of things come into play, let alone the basics of what you do. And so I've got some notes here. What we're going to cover is a couple of things. So the first 24 hours after the death, because trying to get somebody home as quickly as possible, wherever you're calling home, whether that's at your house and whether tangi will be at your house, or whether that's back to a marae or elsewhere, it's working through the first 24 hours so everything runs smoothly. It's understanding what the tikanga is, either at your own home or wherever you're going, whether that's to your marae, to your partner's marae, or to someone else's marae. And the balances between tikanga and religion, as well as tikanga and personal wishes, because you'll often have conflicts there. And it's about knowing how to work through that and knowing who the key decision makers are at the different places you're going to be at. And then also who pays for the tangi. What can you get from what government support you can get, all of those types of things, knowing what you need absolutely and what you don't necessarily need. Then there's the Tangihanga process, what happens through those few days. There's the closing of the coffin. There's the funeral day, choosing pallbearers, and many marae, it's still the cooks. It's not actually who the family want, but it's the cooks. And all of those different things, all those different ritenga and tikanga that maintain the kawa of each marae. In addition to that, what happens post the burial, the hakari, and then taking the wairua, the harimate, the kawe mate, what's the difference? Taking those mate to those different places, taking the memory of your loved one to those different places, and then the origins of the hura kohatu, as well as how do you give back, reciprocity. How do you acknowledge those that attended, those that gave, all of the different things? How do you account for koha? And then how do you give back once you go to someone else's tangi? So those are all the things that I think I'm going to cover, and then look forward to seeing what questions you have, so that we can go from there. And I hope that it can be helpful. In addition, there's COVID's brought out a whole heap of other options. And we've just got to work through those, because some of those options I myself struggle with. But you have to work through them. We had a discussion last year at the master's program that I run, and we talked about water cremations and whether it aligns with tikanga or not. And then there's these other things that talk about, composting, and then pods, and being part of the compost for a tree, because you go into a pod and a tree grows out of it. All of those different things, all of the different options that come, and how that can help us or not. And hopefully over the next season of kōrero, we'll be able to help you and get you through some of these things. So for this introductory kaupapa, what to do. And what to do, my recommendation is to try your hardest to be prepared. And there's both some official and legal things that you need to do. You need to have a death certificate, and it has to be acknowledged that the person died at a certain time. And then you've got to work with the officials for that. There's them working with the undertaker. Whether there's a need for an autopsy and to go to the coroner, and all of those things associated with that. The coroner will make the final decision, but there can be some negotiation, but that's usually only if you know what you're doing. So if you have whānau who know what they're doing, it's really good to connect them with them so that they can help you. Because some people know how to navigate the system quite well and will often have good relationships with the police, with the funeral directors, and even with the coroner and pathologists. So, it's a bit of a morbid take, but when you're the Grim Reaper of your tribe or of your whānau, your hapu, you just learn those things. The other point to note is how you get back to where you need to go to as quick as possible, following everything at the undertakers. And knowing that in some cases, people don't know how to advocate for themselves. One, because you're just freaking out because you've lost a loved one anyway. But two, there's all of these unknowns, and a lot of people freeze when they're around somebody with authority. And so the sooner you can get somebody who can navigate that, the better. In addition, there's all the family rubbish, all of the politics that you have to navigate through. And that's just part of family. Having a will help some of that, but it doesn't help all of it. And if you have some leadership in your family or within your wider hapu that can help you as a whānau navigate, that can be helpful, especially when people are just being pig-headed, and often many sides will be pig-headed. So that's some of the things that you've got to work through, let alone practicalities, especially if you live and you've got to travel some distance to your undertaker. As shocking as it will be, and you might be just getting over things, but you have to take a change of clothes for the deceased if you've got to travel an hour. Otherwise, you then put on more and more time and more pressure onto the whānau, and sometimes that will cost you more with undertakers as well. So, you've just got to work through all of that, because it's an expensive business, and it's really important for people to understand that you can spend a lot of money. And don't get me wrong, there's some amazing undertakers, and you've seen the casketeers and they do an awesome job. But then there's also some really bad undertakers who are really culturally insensitive to any culture except their own. And so we'll do things like just leave the body while they go and have lunch, and they might have lunch in the same room. All of these different things are what you have to get used to, let alone if there's an autopsy, what you have to be prepared for if you are changing the body. And then there's the other natural options, and there's a bit more tikanga being revived around how you do the natural options, and how do you don't use a coffin, and all of the revival of those things that are helping our people. And one of the beautiful things about preparing the body yourself is that you no longer, it's a personal process, and it helps you with your grieving, but also with the advent of us following the Americanization of death processes, because we never used to embalm the way it's done today. It was all copied from America in about the 60s, 70s. There's so much poison that's injected into the body that many urupa are often, probably polluted. And so, all of these things are what you have to think about, let alone navigating your own mamai and working through the loss of a loved one. So those are the types of things I'm going to talk about. And that's an intro as to what to do when you lose a loved one. And when you're talking to people from other cultures, when I was living in London, our flat was a United Nations flat. And in English, we say someone's passed away. And my French and Italian flatmates just didn't know what the hell we were talking about. And so, just little nuances that you might think are normal. They don't understand what the hell we were talking about. So, Kati, I'll be covering a whole range of things, some things to think about to help you navigate the first 24 hours, to work through tikanga and challenges between tikanga and church, the challenges between wills and personal wishes and church, all of those different things, so that we can go from there. And hopefully it's helpful over the next little while. Ka te ake te iwi, good to be back, and take care. And to all our tamariki that have returned or are returning back to school over the next few days and or next week, give it heaps. Enjoy kura, enjoy the learning, and if it gets a bit boring, then find some ways to crank it up so you enjoy it. Ka te ake te iwi, tēnā koutou, po mārire, kia wakaere ake ngā kupu ki te tā unui, orangi nui e tūnei, aumi e, ui e, tā eke kia tātou, kia ora Kelvin.